It is Saturday, August 15th, 2026. It is 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and so you know what time it is. It's time for some D-Shift. And as we've been anticipating, the Bitcoin has been tanking and not quite off the cliff in full free fall yet, but I'm looking forward to it personally. I know that I know some of you might feel differently because just bought at the wrong time, and well, you know, we all get wrecked. Everybody gets wrecked in crypto. And you know, that's, if you do any trading in crypto for any duration of time, you come to that realization and you make peace with it, and you you start to understand that in order to win, sometimes you do have to get wrecked a little bit. And so I hope you guys are having a wonderful Saturday morning. I know I am. Got a couple trades in the green, and most of them are in the red, as is to be anticipated. Basically, the only shit that I got to green right now is intentional counter trades. Where I was long something, and it was just going so far down that I'm like, fuck it, I might as well make money on it down too. So I don't know if that's like standard operating procedure for position trading. Don't get on me. I don't want to hear it. The fact of the matter is, I'm very, very new to position trading. I've been a limit trader this entire time, just been buying the coins, sitting, getting wrecked, and then selling the coins when they would go rocket sauce, as I anticipated they would. But, again, that's one of those things, you just deal with it, I mean, I'm holding on to Verge. I've been holding on to Verge since it was 3 fucking Satoshis. You think I feel bad that it's like 0.2 of a penny right now? Fuck no. All that's profit. So, whatever. You learn to get relativistic about it, It's like, I'm a Verge user. I anticipate that I'll be a Verge user until there is no more Verge or I cease to exist. One of the two. And so, what its current price is, you just kind of, on a long enough timeline, it's all worth 0. So, and also on a long enough timeline, it's also worth more money than you've ever had. Well, that Verge has been worth more money than I've ever had twice. It's worth shit now, but that's beside the point. Point being that you get a long enough perspective with regard to crypto, and things look a lot different. The certainty of what I've been talking about with the idea that Bitcoin mining will go back to the miners, including all transactions as received, and including everyone from the block interval. It's gonna fucking happen. And I categorize it as faith only because I've seen a lot of projects rise and fall, and really didn't see that result happening. However, I also take heart with the knowledge that every one of those was a renegotiation of the idea that you want a block size limit. Now, if you really thought about it and you considered what the block size limit does and how it's affected Bitcoin, if you had the option to include it, you can either not include it, or you can include it but with different terms. So instead of the block size limit being only just 1 megabyte for fucking forever, we'll update it to 32 megabytes. It's just as arbitrary, just as certain to fill up at one point or another, just as certain to be having the same exact fucking problem that Bitcoin is now and has had since about 2014. Cryptocurrencies are not meant to have block size limits. Artificially throttling the transaction throughput completely destroys all of everything you're fucking doing. Like what you... And basically resets you back to where you do need trusted third parties. If only to hold on to the coins or pretend they have the coins until the coins have supposedly transferred from one person to another. And it's finally settled on the quote-unquote blockchain. I wanted to title this Copium Dreams because there's a lot of cope in crypto. And it's felt by pretty much all entities involved. And the cope is that you want to maintain the idea that there's some sort of separation between you and other people. That's the cope. You want to be able to say these people are better than me, or I'm better than those people. This, that, those people, they, them. And in cryptocurrencies, there is no difference between you and them. At any time, one of them could become Satoshi Nakamoto, deploy their own cryptocurrency, and not even include that stupid proposition of, do we want to artificially limit how many transactions we can process? I mean, like, really, if when Bitcoin was initially given to us, when Satoshi first put it out there, do you think anyone would have bothered to sign up if they knew there was an upper limit to how much money they could make? That there was a self-imposed parameter in there that prevented them from earning as much as they could, or as much money was actually on the table to be earned. Everybody would have laughed him out. No, we're not going to go for that shit. That's why the block size limit wasn't set to be enforced until 2014. Because you had up until then to get oriented with what Satoshi actually presented you. And at any time, we can go back to that. If you enjoyed using Bitcoin when you could actually do a Bitcoin transaction on Microsoft's fucking website, if you liked the way it operated back then, be a fucking miner. Don't enforce the block size limit. Throw your big blocks out there. See what happens. Have some fucking faith, for Christ's sake. And I think that's probably the most underrated word in crypto is faith. Faith. I know, it sounds fucking crazy. Deterministic math. What's there to have faith in, right? You have faith in the idea that if you and about 95% of the miners on the network are honest nodes, that you have an honest and kind of likely chance to actually hit the block reward. And of course, there will be people that have advantages over you, and that's why you do things like pooled mining. You know, that's originally why it happened. I mined my first Bitcoin on on slush pool, as a matter of fact. It was back when you could do GPU mining. And it took fucking forever. But it would have been worth it. Like, even now, it would have been worth it. I mean, I've long since spent that fucking money, but it's beside the point. The point being that it would have been worth it on a wage basis. Like, if you were to fast forward from then till now, right? Let's assume that I'm still mining on Slush Pool and I'm doing so with a single GPU on my desktop computer. I'm dedicating about 200-300 mega hashes to mining Bitcoin. And so assume that I'm doing that like now, right? If I was making the same amount of Satoshis a day today as I was back then, just about, I can't remember how many 100 or 1,000 it was a day, but if you were to put it in like $1 of Satoshi terms, or even where we're at now with Bitcoin's price, it would be more than enough to supplement a part-time job. I'd be able to live pretty damn good if I had a part-time job and was still earning $200 to $300 a day. mining Bitcoin with my GPU. And I mean, that's the kind of reality that Satoshi is offering us. And we've completely blown it and gone completely the opposite direction. And I know that its current expression is because the people that have all the money to invest, or at least permission to borrow money on your behalf to invest in it, they like centralized systems where they have control and they get to dictate. Right? Well, that hasn't been a necessity for like shit. I don't know. I don't know if any of you guys remember, but back when the internet really started taking off and mom and pops were getting into being ISPs, it's a fucking fantastic time, by the way. During that time, though, there was a great decline going on with IBM because people were no longer buying mainframes. They were buying tens of thousands of PCs to put throughout their factories. And they maybe bought a couple IBM super servers, whatevers. But their demand went down significantly as far as like rack servers. And a lot of it went and got shit canned because people were doing stuff that didn't require specialized hardware setup. And, you know, like TCP IP, all that stuff changed a little bit, not a lot, but it was enough that it's just different infrastructure now. Okay, a lot more of it's wireless. And you can't even imagine how much ground space and hardware and stuff that just eliminates. But it does. And there are reciprocal effects in the economy. Well, we're going to see the same thing happening, and I see a lot of progress in LLMs, and mostly the stuff that I pay attention to is the local LLMs, because it's my contention that a lot of the necessity for a tech moat, it only exists if you're actually trying to have a service, you know, or sell it as a service. Not if you actually need to use AI to do anything, though. Like, basically your computer, I imagine, has enough computing power capacity to be able to see to all of your AI needs. You know, designing shit, looking shit up on the internet, keeping track of shit. You've got more than enough computing power in your desktop to handle that. So, imagine that whatever AI that you're using, you know, you're using Anthropic or whatever, that you're hosting it in your computer, if you're not already. Where does that leave Anthropic and their necessity to have these huge ass data centers to do all the work? You know, you got Kimmy Lime fucking version 26 or whatever, and it's public, it's open source. You know, UC Berkeley is the lead development group on it, whatever. But the point being that software can always be upgraded and improved faster than hardware. And so if your business model is built around a hardware-based moat, you're going to lose to people iterating software so that it makes up the differential between the stupid-ass CPU in my desktop and the Vera Rubin whatever that you got stacked in some data center somewhere. And I know it sounds fucking crazy, but it's happened several times now where massive data centers full of computers were uprooted and replaced by a few desktops. You know, and there's just this group of people, and they've got it in their mind that computing's got to be something that we feed to you with the fucking spoon, and we're the ones that are holding the spoon, and you got to do what we want you to do with it, and fuck you. Fuck you. Bits and bytes work just as good for me as they do for you. My bits and bytes are just as good as your bits and bytes. Because of that, a lot of the social differentials that we've been trying to maintain via wealth and social status and all that biz, I think all that shit's getting really shaken up. You know, I don't know too many new like actors or even bands anymore. You know, there's no big Rolling Stones that just like everybody's fucking aware of whether or not they want to be. It's just not happening anymore. You gotta wonder about that. And anyway, so yeah, Copium dreams. It's these ideas that we've got. Things like they'll have no choice. They'll have to do it the way we want them to do it. And this is how we're going to make them. Copium dreams. I think it's like an evolutionary thing, you know, we're going through an evolutionary step, and there's some of us that are just not ready to go. You know, kind of like things the way they were, and can't really imagine being able to live in this new system that's being proposed, so I'm just going to hold us here in the Middle Ages as long as we possibly can. Oh, that shit's over. It's over. And I see evidence of that pretty much every day. You know, it's like there are people out there that had full knowledge of 9/11 long before it happened, myself being one of them. I didn't know exactly what the quote-unquote Pearl Harbor event was going to be, but I had read the plans that included it, and it involved everything up to right where we are now, where we're fighting with Iran for Iran's oil. And the intent, back when they wrote up the plan, was that they were basically going to take over the Middle East and convert it into a whole bunch of United States colonies and use their oil to fund it. You know, we pump the oil out of the ground, we run it through the refinery, and we keep the planet dependent on oil for another century. And we get to be the hegemon because we're sitting on all the oil. Well, you can see how that's working out. Iran's pretty much disabled all our fucking bases there, so we got sailors that are jumping ship because they're not able to reacquire necessities due to their location and their proximity to another place, another port of call that they can go to that doesn't exist. It's like 4,000 kilometers away or some shit like that. Point being that it's another one of those copium dreams. Somebody actually thought that we're going to be able to topple Iran and we're going to be able to occupy them, and that Russia and China aren't going to have anything to say about that. Or no, I'm sorry. The imagination was that we would knock down Russia's capability in Ukraine enough to where they would not be able to help Iran, and that is not the case. And the other end of it was that we were supposed to have China so tied up with Taiwan and a few other hot spots there that they wouldn't be able to contribute to Iran either. And again, that has not happened. And we've lost all logistical capability in the surrounding area. Well, not all, but a lot. So, you know, I don't look at this as a national thing. You know, I've never viewed it as a national thing because the number of people that actually planned all this shit was about 12. Included people like Henry Kissinger and Paul Wolfowitz John Ashcroft, Dick Cheney, whole bunch of people that have been in and out of Washington since the Nixon era. And probably actually earlier. Like 1950s and shit. Well, the point being that they've had this plan and they've been pushing it to the nines, and again, I don't view it as an American thing, even though we're the ones that supply all the troops and we do all the logistics and all that other bullshit. But I don't look at it as a quote-unquote American thing, because the vast majority of us, about 97-98% of all Americans, are not going to benefit from it, except in like the tertiary sense, where we're selling one another gas and cars and shit. Well, you just got to think of the audacity of that whole proposition. You're gonna keep the planet dependent on oil? Who the fuck are you? How are you gonna stop the planet from transitioning to fusion or hydro or fucking any number of other sources of energy? I mean, really, the planet is 2/3 covered with fucking water that is going to move whether you want it to or not. Now, why we're not doing so much more to harvest some of that energy and collect it in the form of electricity and attach that shit to the grid, I have no idea. Other than, of course, the fact that constraining water is a great way to try and control people. So yeah, Hopium dreams. I really hope that or Copium dreams rather. I hope we're actually coming out of that cope period. I think that Anthropic and all the big industrial AI operations, I think that's going to be a real big test. For basically the world's tolerance for bullshit. And I think that the world doesn't accept a whole lot of it, honestly. Not even us. I think if we see it on the table, we want to get rid of that shit. You don't want it around stinking out things. But yeah, so Bitcoin, eventually the mining is going to go back to PCs, but it'll do so out of necessity. And we've talked about that a little bit before, where I believe there is going to be a catalyst, most likely governments attacking one another's mining facilities. But there will be a catalyst where, I think I saw something that Trump did, I think an executive order or some note or something, basically categorizing data centers as military targets. And I think they've already been that for quite a while, honestly. As a matter of fact, I believe the deep strike that we did in Iran close to a year ago, I'm not 100% certain, but I would be willing to bet that was a mining facility. And there are a couple reasons I say that. Number one, a major drop in hashing power. I mean, the network lost like 2 exahashes in a day. And it didn't even take a day, it just went. But that's only part of it. The other part of it is I'm noticing a bit more hesitancy with regard to new mining facilities. I'm not hearing about Marathon running all around the planet looking for places where they can buy up cheap energy and ship miners into. I'm not hearing that. And so it's led me to wonder that, maybe that new designation has got landowners, they look at that, they see that as a liability. It's like, oh, wait a minute. So you're saying that at some point, like an ICBM can drop out of the sky and blow us the fuck up because we're a military target now? Yeah, I don't think I want that on my property. You know, that additional liability, or, you know, oh, wait a minute, you're saying there's maybe a fleet of drones is going to come and attack the facility at some point in the future? No. No. And so, you know, again, we talked about centralization from the very beginning. First is liabilities to Bitcoin itself, and of course us, but also to the greater economy. Again, you know, if your mining facilities are owned by your government and are a military target, that means that, say the rest of the world decides not to use Bitcoin, but they do decide to attack our Bitcoin mining facilities that we've got abroad. Now all of a sudden, whatever hashing power you were depending on in like Oman or Qatar or Dubai or some shit like that, it's gone. It just got evaporated. Now what the fuck are you going to do? You can't move your money anymore. So that's why centralization is a bitch. And that's why Satoshi designed and intended Bitcoin to work on PCs. Not even new PCs, old PCs. Because he knew that at some point, if we're using a digital currency and it's dependent on an infrastructure that can be seen from space, that it would most likely be targeted by a military and made inoperable by either a military and or your government. Bitcoin is money despite banks and government, not in compliance with. What we do is 100% legal and always has been. There's no law against creating a payment network that's independent of the Federal Reserve. There's nothing illegal about that at all. They're trying to change that, of course, but money is what you and I think money is, not what the government thinks it is. If you and I have a mutual medium of exchange that we conduct our commerce in, there isn't anybody else that can intercede in that. Nobody we don't introduce. Now, of course, if US dollars are involved, now the Federal Reserve is involved. To some extent. At least in Bitcoin, they're involved in how much they're willing to give up in order to buy Bitcoin, but that's about it. It's not a real issue, other than, of course, the fact that Bitcoin is creating competition for them. And that's the real thing right there, is that this is a competition that is not dependent on your government at all. It's entirely dependent upon you and how you value things. Isn't it amazing having that much power? I know, I think it is. You know, I've enjoyed what I consider to be the closest to free market capitalism since I got into crypto. And you know, I want it for the rest of you. I mean, I don't know if you want it, and I'm not going to try and force it on you. You know, it's nothing that I can actually force on you. It's something that you actually have to want for yourself. And, you know, again, that's not a value judgment either. You know, I think that everybody should be free to get into this as they choose. Or not, as they choose. But I don't even want to pretend for a moment that it's not my choice. Because that's where you start failing. Oh, you know, I'm doing it because so-and-so's doing it. Or no, I'm doing it because I want to. Anyway, got a whole bunch of articles we are going to get into today. But for the moment, I'd like to play some music so I get a sip of something. hang out for a minute and then get back to it. And so as far as music goes, let's see here. There's one in particular that I've been looking for, and I haven't actually been hearing this thing play it. I gotta wonder if it's actually in the list. Well, I'll look for it, but for right now, let's go with some Blackberry Brutality here on the D shift. Alright, that was more than enough. Yeah. As far as what else we're going to get into today, and a whole bunch of shit. And this is another one of them copium dreams we were talking about. And I imagined it would shake out like this, and I imagined that to some extent Micah is also going to go through this, that we are going to see stable coins such as USDC and USDT continuing to be used throughout the Eurozone in exchanges and whatnot, whether or not they're actually compliant with Micah. And this is why. This is on reclaimthenet.org. France's top court kills the under 15 social media ban. The highest court of France has today blocked a bill that banned social media access for those under the age of 15. The court ordered that the social media digital ID law infringed upon freedom of expression. The decision is a major blow to President Emmanuel Macron, who supported the legislation and was trying to encourage other countries to follow suit, but is a win for privacy and free speech. And we can read the order, which we may actually do. I don't know. Depends. The controversial bill would have banned those under 15 from opening a social media account, and it would have come into effect from September 1st. Accounts that were already opened by September 1st would have had to be closed within 4 months, and platforms have had to introduce age verification systems which curb privacy. Quote, by prohibiting minors under the age of 15 from accessing certain online services, the law inherently requires every person, even an adult, to prove their age before accessing them. That was France's Constitutional Council today, just 3 weeks before the law was due to take effect. Quote, the Council holds that the contested provisions, on the one hand, disproportionately infringe upon the freedom of expression and communication, and on the other, fail to provide the legal safeguards necessary to ensure the right to respect for private life, the decision said. The court believes protecting children was a legitimate objective. The bill nonetheless, quote, infringes on freedom of expression and communication in a manner that is not appropriate, necessary, or proportionate to it. Quote, and I don't speak French, so I'm not going to quote that. The government fully understood that checking ID part and thought it a selling point. Quote, for 4 months, all of us in France will have to prove our age, Digital Minister Anne-Lee Hannif told journalists after July vote. Quote, if someone under the age of 15, the account will be closed. The timeline was realistic, she said, quote, because age verification tools already exist. No, they do not. Lawmakers had failed to set out clear rules on how people should prove their age and what limits should apply, meaning there were not enough legal safeguards in place. Bullshit. Never mind. As part of the bill, no one under the age of 15 could have opened an account from September 1st. Platforms had 4 months to close those already open, and they would also need to use age verification approved by the French privacy regulator. Like, put fucking Facebook in a complete and total standstill in France. Give me a break. France moved quickly on this and tried to push the model on everyone else. Quote, this is not about whether children can access social media. It is about whether and when social media can access our children. European Commissioner President Ursula von der Leyen told reporters in Brussels last month, pledging an EU-wide ban after an expert group recommended restricting under 13s. Quote, Our children need time in the real world. Time to play. Time to build friendships. Time to make mistakes. Time to shape their own identity. Their own personality before an algorithm shapes them instead. Give me a fucking break. It's like these people imagine you don't have a fucking brain. Britain's parliament was expected to vote on similar measures by Christmas. Spain, Greece, and Denmark are planning minimum ages. Brazil, Canada, and Norway say they are strongly considering them. Australia made the move last December, barring under 16s from platforms including Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok, and YouTube. And its lawmakers are weighing stricter penalties for data showed mixed success. The platforms themselves, quote, generally oppose blanket bans while saying they would comply. And that's about the best you can expect, is lip service. And the truth is, an intent 8-year-old will fucking find a way, dude. I mean, whether they gotta, like, gank their neighbor's Wi-Fi or they'll figure it out. Now, would you rather have kids that are like having fun on social media and talking to one another and shit there, or trying to figure out how to gank your next door neighbor's Wi-Fi? I would rather have them chatting on Facebook and whatever and having fun there, rather than trying to hack. Now, I'm not against them hacking. I'm just saying, it's necessity is the mother of invention. And so, if you're trying to lower the amount of furtive activity, you've got to keep the barrier for entry non-existent. Because, like, as soon as you drift away from people's own sense of honor and responsibility and that kind of thing, you start imposing restrictions on people that are neither reasonable nor actually provide any security, they're going to get furtive on your ass. That's all there is to it. Continuing. Article 1 of the French bill was the only part struck down. The rest of it still stands, including the school phone ban. And it's not over yet. Macron has told Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu to rewrite the ban, quote, as quickly as possible so that it is enforced before the spring of 2027 election he cannot contest. The next bill will have to be to explicitly say how everyone's proof of age is collected, held, and bound. Dude, this shit isn't going to go anywhere. Earlier this year, Macron urged teenagers to turn off their devices and read in order to become better citizens. Yes, stay ill-informed. Don't communicate with other people. Fuck. These people are such a joke. I'm really, really glad this is like the last generation of these ridiculous fucking people that we are going to have to deal with. Like, I imagine the people that would be in place to replace Macron in France, that they'll be younger, and they will have had most of their life in relative freedom online. And, they would be a lot less willing to give that freedom up than this guy who at least spent part of his life offline. And so it's an optional for him, or he's so far above everybody else that, he doesn't have to worry about it. He's not under 16, so, he doesn't have to worry about getting kicked offline. Well, Mr. Macron, we live in an age of AI and facial recognition and social credit score systems. And I know that, efficiency being, the efficiency of electronics being what they are, that a lot of these things, there's at least, like, root elements of it distributed throughout all of our systems now. You know, it's like in manufacturing, you don't just make one chip for one people or one customer. You have like several different designs that you can run on the same hardware so that you can cover parts for more than one vendor at a time. Well, you know, this is kind of the same case. You know, that I expect that, you know, a lot of this setup for the AIs that are supposed to interface with all this stuff, it already probably exists. And so tracking you down specifically and barring you specifically from the internet, I don't think would be too difficult a chore. Of course, you know, then you'd have to get furtive. But, yeah, you know, you gotta do what you gotta do to get online. But yeah, so social media bans, I think they're ridiculous. And if you want to see what the next iteration of social media looks like, and file sharing looks like, and cryptocurrencies looks like, look to the children. Because these age limits, what they're really going to do, it's not going to get kids to not be online. They're going to figure out a new way to gather together. You know, things like ICQ. Uh-oh. That shit still exists. Still works. The technology still works. There's nothing about the code behind ICQ that, for whatever reason, just no longer functions. I mean, if you have to, you can make it go over Bluetooth or some shit like that. But there's utility for that stuff. People actually want that stuff. And I can guarantee you, there are apps out there right now that people are using to get around social media bans. And they're not honoring any age limits. And France, or at least Macron, is blissfully unaware of it. And that's pretty much the way it's going to stay. But, you know, after a while, they will hit a critical mass, though. Meaning that there'll be enough utility in what they develop that it draws the attention of adults. It's inevitable. You know, adults will probably even help them design and build it. You know, this reminds me of a friend of mine. We were just talking the other day, and apparently his grandson has decided to build his own browser because there's something with Google or whatever he doesn't like, and so he's like, you know what, fuck it, I'm just gonna make my own browser. I mean, just the thought that was inspired in the mind of a kid that young, to me that's heartening. Okay, this asshole in his social media ban, okay, that he's trying to push on the whole planet, it's probably not even his idea. But it's going to push those kids that are talking about things like building their own browsers. And they're going to build their own fucking social media app, and they're just not going to tell you about it. Of course, you'll find out about it inevitably because you'll want something that happens to be on their markets, like maybe ecstasy or some shit like that. And yeah, you know, it'll become a dominant player. But I see evidence that we're going more and more towards that again. That the standard has changed. You actually have to be like doing some sort of evil or conniving shit in order to draw the negative attention that you should actually deserve. But I do have to wonder if that force will also be used in cases like this, where say Macron figures out that, there's somebody that's got an app that's letting kids converse and have markets and so on and so forth, and you might want to try and do something about that. Well, that's where decentralization comes in. That's what makes it a desirable trait in your network, is that not enough of it can be taken down at any one time to make it worthwhile. And I think that we're going to end up going more and more to such systems because of this shit. Like, really, why would you want to stay on the internet if you got this dickhead telling your fucking kids that they can't be there? Why wouldn't you just, like, if you were so inclined, try to build your own fucking network? Or network by networking with other people, of course. But the thing is, it's like completely circumnavigate government entirely. Don't even involve them. Just wire your way around the neighborhood. Or go wireless where you can. The point I'm getting at is that I really think that an age where this kind of control or these kind of expectations from our leaders, I think they are obsolete in many ways, because it's like, it's one thing for you to have a freedom, it's another thing for you to know how to use it, right? And I believe that more and more people are learning how to use freedoms that these people never intended for us to ever acquire in our own homes. But alas, they are here. Things like the internet. That I'm sure it just fucks all their goddamn, planning and all that for us to be able to communicate with one another. And it's only getting worse because the kinds of things that we can communicate today are like 3D specs for solid products, like tools and guns and shit. And the ability to design even more, design and make even more of it, is coming down to individuals. In another 5 years, I will most likely have a 3D printer that prints stuff that's made of metal. And it'll be because it's become cheap enough for me to have one and use one at my house. Or maybe even build one. I mean, that's entirely feasible and possible too these days. That's the scary part about it. These guys are talking about, we want to look at all the STL files that you're planning on printing, and we want to qualify or approve. Oh, fuck you. Fuck you. My fucking 3D printer doesn't even connect to the internet. How the fuck are you going to stop me from printing whatever the fuck I want? Oh, right. You're not. You're going to shut the fuck up. And really, that's how I feel about it. That the capabilities coming down to the hands of the average person these days are, in my estimation, so far beyond the expectations of people like Macron or even Trump. Even though I think he's pretty far ahead of the curve, I don't even know that he could fully conceptualize. Like, I don't think he would have agreed to like half the shit that he agreed to during his first term if he could see coming what I can see coming. Because like the ways that we've been impaired as far as how we can participate in the market over the last couple decades, I think it's also held back the transition of American ideas to physical goods. As we've seen more and more centralization of manufacturers, we're seeing fewer and fewer ideas actually being expressed and coming out to market. Well, at the same time, And I was just imagining it today that I could probably design an electric outboard in FreeCAD. I can probably print all of the parts for it with my 3D printer. At least prototype physical parts for like conceptual models and shit. But then I could send whatever parts need to be made in metal to somebody else and have it made in metal and sent back to me. Now, I can anticipate that there's maybe like 1 or 2 layers of sophistication that are required there. That if somebody were to concentrate enough like machining power in one location, you know, maybe get a few AIs involved, that's the kind of thrust I see the future going toward. That to me is the way we're going. You know, this idea that we're going to keep mankind limited to only using petroleum-based fuels is fucking ridiculous. There's so many other things we can make burnable fuels out of. Alcohol. You know where alcohol comes from? It comes from sugar, which comes from organic matter. But it can be rendered into fuels. So, you know, again, this is a battle that it's like an evolutionary step that we've been trying to circumvent and we haven't gotten around yet. That is going to basically redefine freedom for people, I think. You know, things like growing your own food. You know, it's like, okay, so you've managed to replace me at a manufacturing center with robots and AI, but I'm still alive, so my food's got to come from somewhere. Maybe I could be using AI and robots and a little bit of room I've got to grow my own food. It's not that difficult. Or at least it's never been as easy as it is now. So again, I think a couple layers of sophistication in there. You know, maybe a print house where they've got 3D lathes and they're hooked up to AI, and you send them off an STL, they print it off. And a friend of mine has I think it's like an 8-axial fucking 3D CNC mill. And it's just amazing. Just amazing that such a device could be made so small. But, you know, you imagine you've got somebody who's got a building with about 20 or 30 such devices in it. And, you know, they could be receiving orders from all over the planet for custom metal products. So, you know, with that being reality, I have a hard time imagining that the current constraints and red tape that inhibit a lot of business are going to stay in place. Because, you know, what I'm talking about as far as like a shop that receives orders and produces metal parts for you, that's entirely doable, like right now. Entirely doable right now. And really, you need like 10 kids, 16-year-old kids. You can give them a good job to do, and you could probably make exactly what I'm talking about. And it's that reachable. It really is. So, you know, again, you can't imagine being able to maintain things like monopolies. Give me a fucking break, dude. if it's never patented or copyrighted, if somebody just uploads the design to some fucking repository, you like pay $5 for a copy of it, forget about it. It's done. It's over. You know what I mean? And good luck to you with your fucking embargoes and shit. No. I could only imagine how this would go in like North Korea, or in a place where there's like far more repressive regimes, that like maybe one day they would like break into one of their civilians' houses and like find all kinds of stuff in there that is not permitted. It's like magnetic firearms and shit pointed at them, robots, AIs, and yeah. I imagine it's probably going to go down that way somewhere in the United States sometime. That the feds will get wind that somebody's got a mech on their property or some shit like that. And they'll raid it. The mech will kick their ass. Oh, one can dream. One can dream. But the possibility of something like that, I don't think has ever been more possible. I mean, supposedly in China you can buy a mech for like $650,000. And, I mean, it didn't have any armor on it or anything like that. No jetpack. But it was a fucking mech. I mean, you put that guy that made the Killdozer, I can't remember his name, but you give him that mech, I'm sure he'd come up with something scary. Anyway, so yeah, France, top court kills under 15, social media blame, good. I saw something on Thursday, made me think that AML KYC might be going away. And it was, oh shit, what was that? I want to say it was like the U.S. Treasury or something, that they were relieving this requirement for companies to find out, or to define whether or not they have like a beneficial relationship with an individual or some shit like that. But I started really thinking about it as far as like the implications of what are the materials that one gathers in order to analyze, in order to define such relationships. Well, AML KYC data. And so I thought about it, and it's like, well, if I'm eliminating the utility of the AML KYC data, why am I going to continue to gather AML KYC data? And the answer is you would not. So I'm starting to think that maybe there's a good possibility that governments are starting to understand the stupidity of gathering everybody's data for just because they decided to trade cryptocurrencies. And that there are other ways to track actual criminals that don't require us to expose all of our most sensitive personal data to ID thieves in fucking India. And Coinbase specifically hires fucking sweatshops in India to do their customer service. What's the ID thief capital of the known universe? India. Sorry, India. It's true. You guys have made a fucking industry of it. I don't blame you. There's money in it, but just saying. Just stating facts here. I mean, like, really, if you're not trying to expose all of your customers to the potential of getting $5 wrench attacked, why would you do that? I mean, I can think of a lot of other areas I'd be more than happy to be hiring competent customer service agents who I am confident would not be stealing my fucking customers' data. But anyway, so yeah, I'm starting to think that there's a good possibility that they are becoming aware of the danger that they are introducing to themselves and others by even bothering to gather that shit. It doesn't help in criminal investigations at all. All of the necessary data to assist you in a criminal investigation is publicly available as is. So why the necessity to associate a taint like that? Fuck you. Anyway, continuing. I got this thing on the block.co. CBOE seeks SEC nod for first US 3x Bitcoin and Ether ETFs. And, I'm sorry, this just caught my eye. Terribly curious. This is by Daniel Kuhn. It was authored on August 14th, 2026 at 3:01 p.m. Eastern Time. CBOE BNZ Exchange is looking for U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission approval to list a suite of leveraged commodity exchange traded funds, including 3x daily Bitcoin and Ether products. According to the proposed rule change proposal on Friday, the firm is looking to introduce a 3x gold ETF, 3x silver ETF, 3x Bitcoin ETF, 3x Ether ETF, 3x crude oil ETF, 3x natural gas ETF, all of which are aiming to deliver 3 times the daily performance of its underlying asset, primarily by holding futures contracts on CME or COMEX with cash and cash equivalents as collateral. Generally speaking, highly leveraged funds are designed for short-term tactical trading by sophisticated investors, not long-term holding. Quote, the sponsor defined below will increase and decrease the number of benchmark futures contracts that each fund holds in order to accommodate purchases and redemptions of shares and to account for changes in the value of the benchmark so that each fund can meet its daily investment objective, CBOE wrote. Of note, the funds are designed to operate as, quote, commodity pools under Commodity Futures Trading Commission oversight rather than the traditional 1940 Act investment companies overseen by the SEC. Like many ETFs, a commodity pool is an investment fund that combines money from multiple investors to trade derivatives or other commodity-related instruments. Additionally, because funds seek leveraged returns, they fall outside the exchange's general listing standards and require specific SEC approval, hence the rule change request. CBOE will also file a related Form S-1 registration statement under the Securities Act of 1933, according to the filing. Oh, so they will make definitive claims as to what will be in the basket. CBOE referred to this structure as, quote, additional layer of federal regulatory oversight beyond what a physical commodity-based exchange-traded product would be subject to. The filing notes that Volatility Shares LLC will sponsor the funds, which will enter the VS Trust. Volatility Shares already offers 2x Bitcoin and others and Ether strategy ETFs in the U.S. stock market. Leveraged Shares debuted the world's first 3x and negative 3x Bitcoin and Ether ETFs in Europe last year. Dude. Yeah. I don't know what to think of this one. I think if they're that hard up for liquidity that they're talking about 3x returns on gold. Yeah, they're desperate, and I can't imagine what they're throwing the money at that's so volatile that they can actually afford to meet these daily performance requirements. I can only imagine what it is. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw back down with some music. And there was a specific song I was looking for. No. No. I'm very tempted. Very tempted to play that one. Patterns in the Sky. Here on the D shift.
Be a good rest. Make choice. That's in the splendor.
That was enough of that. And so, trying to keep from boring the hell out of you guys. Thank you very much for joining me today, by the way. I really appreciate that. Anyway, I do have more articles that I wanted to get into. And yeah, here's one of them copium dreams, alright. You know, a lot of people during this time of the cycle have difficulty letting go. You know, they've lost a lot of money, they bought at the top, and you know, but they're looking at the chart and they're saying to themselves, well, there's a likelihood that I'm probably not going to see Bitcoin at 63,000 again for probably another 2 years. So I might want to consider getting out now and, you know, kind of holding on to some of that money, you know. And so I got this thing here. It's on finance.yahoo.com. Jim Cramer is selling his Bitcoin, citing the quantum threat. Here's why he's wrong. This is by Dominic Basulto, the Motley Fool, I guess he works for. This is authored on August 15th, 2026 at 9:12 a.m. Pacific Time. CNBC Mad Money host Jim Cramer is selling his Bitcoin, but not for the reason you might think. He's not dumping crypto for artificial intelligence stocks in search of higher returns, as many investors are now doing. Instead, Jim Cramer is selling his Bitcoin because he's worried about the quantum threat. In short, he's concerned that super powerful quantum computers will soon be able to crack Bitcoin's cryptography, potentially leading to hundreds of billions of dollars in losses for crypto investors. How real is the quantum threat? Cryptocurrencies are valuable for the cryptographic encryption they provide. If that encryption is ever put at risk, it could lead to a crisis of investor confidence. That's why the so-called quote-unquote quantum threat posed by quantum computers has been percolating around Bitcoin for nearly a decade now. The good news is, today's computers, no matter how powerful they are, have no realistic chances of breaking Bitcoin's encryption. But what about tomorrow's computers? That's what has Jim Cramer worried. Earlier this year, the quantum computing research unit at Alphabet made headlines when it suggested that Bitcoin might be at much more risk than ever suspected. As much as 1/3 of all Bitcoin in the world might be at risk, and the threat, far from being some far-off science fiction reality, might actually materialize within the span of just a few years. Not really. No wonder then that a number of high-profile investors have already thrown in the towel on Bitcoin. Cramer did so after IBM CEO Arvind Krishna appeared on Mad Money to comment on quantum computers and the quantum threat. However, plenty of investors think the quantum threat is way overblown. Some think that the threat is decades away. Even if the threat is just several years away, that should give the blockchain developer community plenty of time to update Bitcoin's cryptography for the quantum era. Absolutely unnecessary. Post-quantum cryptography for Bitcoin. And indeed, that appears to be happening with Bitcoin right now. In July, a consortium of more than a dozen firms led by Coinbase Global and Strategy announced efforts to boost Bitcoin's cryptography to combat the quantum threat. All told, more than $15 million has now been pledged to fight the quantum threat and to protect the Bitcoin blockchain for future generations of investors. That leads me to think that many of the current fears about quantum computing have been hyped to an unrealistic level. If you lived through the Y2K Millennium Bug Hype bonanza, you'll know exactly what I mean. People thought the world was going to fall apart as soon as the year clicked from 1999 to 2000, but what actually happened? Nothing. With that in mind, I'm still bullish on Bitcoin. The quantum threat is exactly the type of fear, uncertainty, and doubt that always appears during crypto bear markets. Just what I was saying beforehand. For now, I'm ignoring this threat and focusing on Bitcoin's long-term growth trajectory. Should you buy stock in Bitcoin now? No, you don't buy stock in Bitcoin. You either buy Bitcoin or you buy something else. Before you buy stock in Bitcoin, consider this. The monthly cool 10 best stocks, blah, blah, blah. Consider Netflix. It's nuts. So stock advisor. Oh, there's comments. Let's look at the comments. Thomas, why would anyone want to buy Bitcoin? Waste of money. For the moment, maybe. Oscar says the same reason you buy gold when it doesn't produce yield. Ignorant clown. Pfft. And then Advocat says Kramer is right. No, Kramer is not right. Kramer is never right. Not once, not ever. I think he's meant to get it wrong. I think he's supposed to get it wrong. There is no quantum threat. None. It doesn't fucking exist. It's imaginary. Somebody thought it up as a bullshit example, and like they didn't mean it, but somebody took them seriously. And so we've been kicking it around ever since. But it is not actually a threat. And the simple fact is that if there were such a quantum threat and somebody did actually attack the Bitcoin network and you know, do some shit, you know, send some money that wasn't theirs to their wallet. Now, I mean, I think it's far more likely that someone would crack a SegWit address and do that. But anyway, point being that if they were able to, and it was a good enough hack that they moved a lot of coins, maybe like Satoshis or something like that, right? So they move them. Now what? They've got the Bitcoin. Everybody knows they've got the Bitcoin because the transaction happened on a public ledger. So you can either blacklist them, you can roll the Bitcoin blockchain back so it didn't even happen, or I don't know. I don't think that the attacker would be able to liquidate the funds fast enough to make it worth it, basically. And that's kind of the security thing for Bitcoin in general, is the inability to attack it in such a way and get the rest of the world to go with it. Anyway. And this is on CoinDesk. Why the world's second largest Bitcoin mining power is shutting down rigs in its capital city. This is by Francisco Rodriguez, and it's edited by Aeon Ashraf. I guess this was about 5 hours ago. Crypto mining was banned in Moscow, the surrounding Moscow region, and parts of Kursk, with the restrictions set to run through December 31st, 2032. The measure, established under Government Decree number 936, also prohibits participation in crypto mining pools. The decree was signed on July 25th and published on July 31st, local media reports. Russia as a whole accounted for an estimated 175 exahashes per second, or 16.4% of Bitcoin's global computing power in the first quarter, according to Luxor's hash rate index. That placed it second behind the US, although it's unclear what capacity was located in the newly restricted region. The country's energy ministry said a year-round restriction was needed to reduce the risk of power capacity shortages as energy-intensive mining facilities connect to regional grids. Mining currently consumes roughly 1 megawatt in the Moscow power system, while the region's data center capacity could reach 3.6 gigawatts, or 17% of peak demand, by 2032, Interfax reported after the decree was first signed. Mining is also linked to the country's Western sanctions. Russian companies had been using domestically mined Bitcoin in the international payments after legal changes designed to counter Western restrictions, Finance Minister Antov Silnulov said in December 2024. Legislation passed by Parliament in July maintained Russia's ban on domestic crypto payments, but preserved exemptions for foreign trade settlements and transactions involving mined cryptocurrency, keeping the mechanism available as sanctions restrict conventional payment channels. Adding to that, the U.S. Treasury sanctioned BitRiver and 10 subsidiaries in 2022, saying Russian mining companies helped the country monetize its energy resources and could offset the impact of sanctions. Russia legalized registered crypto mining back in 2024 before banning the activity in 10 regions through March 2031, citing electricity demand. Year-round restrictions were later extended to southern Irkutsk and most areas of Buryatia and Zabaikala and Krai, whatever that is. So it would seem that Russia and their government are going through the same kind of fantasies that China went through. You know, there's still a significant amount of mining that's done in China. And I would say not all of it is state-backed. And I would also go so far as to suggest that in reality, if you were to go throughout the Chinese countryside, as unified as they claim to be in their rule and whatnot, I would imagine that there are a great number of Bitcoin mining facilities out there that nobody but the operator actually knows about. And for the most part, the Chinese government probably sees it within their best interest to just leave them the fuck alone. And so I would imagine the same is also happening in Russia, because there have been so many sanctions and trade restrictions placed on them that I don't know, they've always struck me as a very enterprising and opportunistic people. And that being said, I think that they would probably be very quick to utilize cryptocurrencies in a variety of ways to circumvent not only international restrictions, but also national ones as well. And so as far as any of these restrictions that governments put on their people like that, I always look at them as something that's only going to be selectively enforced. Meaning that if you just got a few ASICs and you're doing a small operation, you know, you're making a couple $1,000 a month or something like that, they're probably not going to fuck with you. But, you know, if you happen to have a hash farm and a place they can send cops with guns to point at you, that would, of course, change. We talked about this for like months and years before Bitcoin even came out, that these kind of threats would be ever present in crypto and would threaten to disrupt it. However, again, I can't concentrate your attention enough on this. Satoshi designed Bitcoin to run on PCs. And this is exactly why. Because as their enforcement capabilities go up, where they can do things like send drones and robots to your fucking mining facility and fuck with you, the necessity to make your operations small and yet still functional goes up. And so, yeah, I think we're still in a flux where governments like Russia and China, they've got that two-edged sword. They could bust the local miners, but that would lower the amount of mining that's actually going on in their country, which is increasing access to international markets, which is keeping your economy alive and functioning. So, yeah, leave it the fuck alone. Anyway, I got one more on here before I wanted to get onto a break. But of course, it's a fucking description for a video, son of a bitch. I hate that. Hate it. But yeah, so we've been talking about copium dreams. And again, this is on the part of the Russian government. They're having some copium dreams. They're facing the loss of control on the economy like this, and they're still not certain of how to go forward with it. And the fact of the matter is that because money is something that you define for yourself, wherever that seems to accumulate, that will be the thing that starts to determine the new power centers. So like places where Bitcoin mining is freely permitted and encouraged, and cryptocurrency mining in general is highly encouraged. That's the place that's actually going to get ahead. And I think that probably the next 2 to 3 years, that's the process that we're going to be going through, where governments and banks, they're looking at the return on investment of doing things one way versus another way, and they're going to start seeing that, well, regulatory capture in crypto really isn't positive because it actually inhibits and chills economic activity overall, not just in crypto. So the more permissive we get on this, the more money people will make, and the higher level of economic activity will happen, the higher number of taxable events will happen, so on, so forth. That's really what they're facing these days. It's like, okay, well, we can try and maintain this stupid idea of us having a complete stranglehold on the economy and like slowly killing off property owners into where we just have a renter class and a monarchy that runs everything. Dude, the modern economy requires fucking money going through it. And not just from 0.00001% of us spending their fucking money down to the rest of us. I mean, this should have been obvious by about like 2016 that the existence of crypto and the ability of monetary value to transition into and out of and create more value in between caused the economy to be able to grow to what it is today. It wouldn't have been possible without it. On the trajectory that the central bankers had us on, we would have been where we're at with this fucking war with Iran, but it would have been because the demand for oil was so high that we're chasing supply of it all over fucking planet Earth and liberating it. And to some extent we've been doing that, except we've been doing it kind of like proactively, like getting ahead of it a little. But even so, I expect that a lot of the black market and gray market oil that's been coming into the market is starting to get legitimate owners behind it. And as that happens, the taxation, regulation, red tape, all that shit goes up. And so the associated costs with acquiring it go up as well. And the number of places that we're able to invade and just steal from is gotten pretty fucking low. So yeah, fun times ahead, definitely. But I don't expect that the rest of the world is going to accept the current tenor of things as being the new term for like civilization. Because inevitably we're killing customers out there. That's not good to do if you're trying to encourage the growth of the economy, you know? Yeah. And so, yeah, Bitcoin mining power, energy. Yep. They only claim to be shutting down rigs in Capital City here, but I would imagine that the demand will stay high enough that they'll continue mining elsewhere. Like they wouldn't plan a transition like this if they didn't already have somewhere else they were going to be making the money. So, yeah. Anyway, Russia, they're in my mind they're kind of an enigma where it comes to crypto, and I hold China in the same light that they've both gone through the full Monty of government saying, oh, we're going to ban it entirely. Oh, well, maybe just a little. Oh, okay, well, maybe I'll totally let it happen. You know, and they vacillated through those phases so many times that I really have to wonder about, like, the purpose of it and whether or not it's something that will continue in the future. I don't think it will be. I think if they're at all successful at diminishing the mining coming from one facility, that they would notice the loss in economic activity and they would be like, well, you know, maybe that wasn't such a wonderful idea. Maybe we won't do that in this restriction until 2030. Fuck that. You know, we're not gonna comply with that. I would argue, you know, if they haven't shut down yet, they probably won't shut down. Energy capacity issues or not, they'd probably find another way to supply the energy. And I think we're facing a few, like fusion and a few other developments that are going to make energy cheaper. I mean, we're always trying to, so, you know, efficiency, man. Efficiency always wins. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw back down with some music. And then we'll finish it out on the mic. Let's see here. Chaos and Harmony here on the D shift.
That means why they killed me, bro.
Alright. And so, yeah, like I pledged to do, I'm going to go ahead and finish this one on the mic. And, yeah. And so I do have a couple more articles that I wanted to get into today. And I saw this one and I gotta wonder, is this a copium dream? I don't know. So this is on investing.com. Bitcoin price holds near 63,000 as selling pressure offsets regulatory progress. And this is by Simon Mugo. And it was authored on August 15th, 2026 at 5:41 a.m. And son of a bitches. Oh. Maybe it'll let me actually read this fucking thing. Okay, maybe? Yeah, okay, cool. Investing.com. Bitcoin traded slightly above 63,000 on Saturday. Little changed over the past 24 hours as corporate selling, delayed U.S. regulatory action, and weakening technical signals outweighed strength across equity markets. The world's largest cryptocurrency was trading up 0.2% at $63,092.80 as of 15:31 Eastern Time. Its failure to follow U.S. stocks to record highs pointed to crypto-specific pressure rather than a broader retreat from risk assets. Strategy, the largest corporate holder of Bitcoin, sold 1,690 Bitcoin worth about $108.6 million, according to Blockonomy. The transaction added supply to a market already struggling to regain momentum. Sentiment also weakened after the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission postponed a planned innovation exemption for tokenization projects, extending uncertainty over when the new blockchain-based financial products could receive some regulatory relief. Technical analysts are watching 63,220 as a key weekly level. A close below it could turn former support into resistance and leave Bitcoin exposed to further losses. Investors are also waiting U.S. personal consumption expenditures inflation data on August 26th for signals on interest rates and risk appetite. Longer-term adoption developments offer some support. Grayscale said government deficits, wider blockchain use, and changing portfolio preferences among younger investors could increase Bitcoin adoption beyond the current bear market. The asset manager argued that persistent sovereign debt may strengthen demand for scarce assets. It also pointed to growth in tokenized securities, stablecoins, and regulated investment products as links between crypto and traditional finance. On the regulatory front, the Office of Comptroller of the Currency granted preliminary conditional approval for World Liberty Trust Company to operate as a national trust bank. The Trump-linked firm plans to assume issuance and custody of World Liberty Financial's USD1 stablecoin from BitGo, subject to further pre-opening requirements. The approval drew fresh criticism from Democratic lawmakers concerned about President Donald Trump's crypto interests. Trump is also expected to attend a White House meeting with crypto, prediction market, and AI executives on Wednesday. Leaders from Coinbase, Ripple, Gemini, Robinhood, CME Group, NASDAQ, and Intercontinental Exchange, are among those involved in the administration's new innovation committee. Crypto prices today. Altcoins mostly mixed on Saturday. Broader crypto prices were mostly mixed on Saturday, even as Bitcoin edged higher. World number 2 crypto Ether rose 0.2% to $1,884.35, World 3 crypto XRP shed 0.4% and was trading at $1 and like 0.3 cents. Solana was up 0.7% while BNB was up 0.3% and was trading at $610.30. Conversely, Cardano had slumped 1.1% and was trading at 17.7 cents. Among meme tokens, Dogecoin had inched up 0.1%. So yeah, it's kind of following my. They left out Litecoin. Litecoin seems to have leveled off from its decline, and I see it. I see it beginning to pick back up again in the not so distant future. Let me see if I can bring up the chart there and give you a speculation as to when to expect such a thing. Come on, type in there. There we go. LTC and USDT is currently at about $44 and 8 cents. A little bit of a bounce up. Oh wow, holy crap. I had a buy order in for it at $39.19, and this is how tricked out I think this fucking thing is, dude. It got down to $39.40 and then went back up. It missed my buy order by 21 cents. It's just fucking ridiculous. Anyways, and I would have made money on that too. I'd have made $6 a coin. Anyway, it may come back down again. I doubt it will, though. I think that we've probably hit the bottom on Litecoin, and that we're going to continue to go sideways for just a little bit, and then it's going to shoot the fuck back up again. And I want to be there when that happens. But yeah, there's usually a period of desperation and depression and just not happiness that precedes another good run on Litecoin. And yeah, just looking at the chart, you can see where it goes through these massive spikes. You know, this chart I'm looking at started in 2018. And Litecoin has been around since like 2012, 2013. So, you know, we've had time to see its rhythms. And so where it's at right now, I think we're going to go through a parabolic cycle with Litecoin. Like, if you look at it from 2018 until about 2023, that's the kind of interval I'm expecting us to have. Because it basically, on this chart, it ended on August 22nd, 2023, and then it went into a more depressed run, but nonetheless, it still got up over $130. It's just the previous run, it had gotten up to 410. And see, I think we're going to have another one of those parabolic runs. See, that what started that one back in 2017, 2018 was the increased cost of just using Bitcoin. I had one transaction in 2017. It was the last time I actually used Bitcoin as money. And I was trying to do a withdrawal from a Bitcoin ATM, and it was taking 2 forevers, and the transaction fee was $22 on an $80 withdrawal. And I'm like, okay, I'm never using Bitcoin again. And the next time that I was in the area getting ready to do another withdrawal, I used Bitcoin Cash instead. And that one was actually pretty wild, because I did that like all right there. I had a special wallet. I'm not going to name it because wallets tend to get attacked if they get named on a show. So I'm just not going to name it. Anyway, I was using this specific one that allows you to exchange from one coin to another. And it has it like built in. And so I exchanged the Bitcoin for Bitcoin Cash on it. and then I sold the Bitcoin Cash on the ATM for US dollars. And I ended up paying like the transaction fee for Bitcoin to Bitcoin Cash was more expensive than the one from Bitcoin Cash to US dollars. I'll just say that. But like I said, after that I just stayed away from Bitcoin. My first Bitcoin transaction was free. No transaction fee at all. So, my expectations are a bit different than the rest of you out there. See, I think things are supposed to improve, not get shitified as time goes on. But if you look at Bitcoin, that's exactly what's happened to it. Where the majority of the miners that are currently dominating the network are in fact selfish mining tiny blocks. And they've been doing so since about 2014. It's not going to last forever. No attack ever does. And it is because, and Satoshi laid it out, he said it, and people mistake, I think they mistake it due to the tenor of the sentence. But it's not a suggestion. He says that miners should find it most profitable to play by the rules. Again, this is not a suggestion. It's play by the fucking rules. Because the rules are established a certain way, the economics are set up a certain way, to do things a certain way. And because of that, if you don't follow the rules, you are going to run out of money. Because the only way for Bitcoin mining to be profitable is if the transaction fees increase over time in volume. If that doesn't happen, the miners go broke because they can't make enough money on the block subsidy to keep the fucking lights on. They're spending an average of like $80,000 a coin, whether they mine the fucking thing or not. And that's happening every 10 minutes. Again, I don't care if you are the money printer, which I would be willing to bet is pretty close to the truth. But even if you do print the Federal Reserve note, you're going to end up printing yourself into dilution, trying to continue to cheat at mining Bitcoin. People wonder what the super hyperinflation catalyst is. That's what it is. It's organizations going to the Fed with their hand out, or the Fed just creating them and then selling it off. And then they subsidize it for 3 to 5 years after they've sold it, and then they go kaput. That's why Marathon is going to AI now. For the longest time, they were just so dominant in Bitcoin mining. If they didn't have AI to go to, Marathon would be bankrupt and closed down by now. Because industrial mining is not profitable. It looks profitable. Intuitively, you would think that the more powerful you are, the more Bitcoin you can mine, and so the more profitable you're going to be, right? Well, maybe if you were the only guy in the whole fucking world trying to do it, but you're competing against a whole planet full of people that are trying to do it. And none of you has any intrinsic advantage over the rest. Not any permanent one, anyway. Between hardware depreciation and the rest of the planet chasing after you, you can't stay ahead. And actually, it's not even in your interest to stay ahead. Because the more people actually have Bitcoin, the more people can spend Bitcoin. And that's how miners are supposed to be making their money, is people spending Bitcoin. So yeah, Eventually, the miners will go back to including all transactions as received only because it is the only economical way to maintain Bitcoin into the future. I mean, block rewards should be tens if not hundreds of Bitcoin per block every 10 minutes. And I know that sounds fucking crazy, but it's because all you people look at is the fucking block subsidy. The part that you're going to get no matter what. You don't look at the potential transaction fees you could be earning. Especially not you monkeys that are planning blocks like 6-7 blocks in advance. Get the fuck out of here. If you were really mining Bitcoin, you wouldn't be able to do that. Because all of the transactions you've received would be included in the next block. And so how do you plot the block after that? You can't. You have to take the transactions as you receive them, just like everybody else. So yeah, that is eventually how it's going to go. And not quite yet. We still have some entities out there that are getting federally funded, even if they are being built on private land to get around zoning restrictions. But we're seeing probably the least amount of investment in such build-outs, specifically for Bitcoin, that we've seen in several years. And this is because Bitcoin has run into a utility wall. It ran into it in 2014, and it's just taken until now for enough of the market to fuck off and do something else for it to be in this position where it is going down, and currently at 50% of its all-time high. It is not done falling. The utility issue has not been resolved, and until the miners are including all transactions as received, it won't be resolved. But I imagine that sometime within the next 3 to 5 years, between Bitcoin halvenings, because we're coming up on another one here soon, and hardware depreciation and lower investment in industrial mining ops, and also on top of that, mining operations becoming military targets, I expect we're going to see that transition back to a more decentralized future for cryptocurrencies. Now, one thing I find kind of exciting is governments have been talking a lot about putting things quote-unquote on-chain. Now, I've never heard any one of them describe exactly what quote-unquote blockchain these things are going on. Are they going to go on a side chain of Base, which is itself a side chain off of Ethereum, which I think is also a side chain off of a proof of network? Anyway, is that what the fuck is the blockchain underneath? Who's mining it? What incentive do they have to be correct about what they're doing? And all of these aspects of crypto are going to be revisited, only it's going to have some sort of federal government association. But again, because it's probably not going to be you or me that's mining it, it probably won't be useful to either you or me. And as they intend to use it solely in punitive manner instead of economically beneficial, I expect that the majority of the market will reject it. We've already seen where governments have attempted to force their people to use cryptocurrencies, and they have all inevitably failed. You've heard of CBDCs. Well, they've tried limited CBDC trials in several countries starting in 2018, and every single one of them had less than 15% compliance after 2 months. That's 85% of your fucking economy that just like went up in smoke if the only thing you were bothering to keep track of was the CBDC. And most of those transactions were just to exit the CBDC into something else. So, yeah, the likelihood that we're ever going to see the imposition of a CBDC is low, and the mechanics of trying to do so are already well known. And the likelihood that it would be any different if it was the euro or the US dollar that they were trying to do it with is also known. And it is with that I'd like to close out this episode. Thank you very much for listening. I certainly do appreciate the support. We will be back again next Saturday on here. I'll be on Twitch Tuesday and Thursday at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And so until then, I want y'all to have an excellent shift. See ya.